Welcome to Tansson TV Plus. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Mom.
Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yep, thank you for joining with us again.
We always love doing this. And Mom, how are you doing today?
Brandon, I am doing fine. It's a particularly warm day for January, but I am doing fine.
Yes, it definitely is. And Mom, heading into, of course, this new year, we're going to be doing something a little bit different for some upcoming discussions, starting with this one.
Yes, we're talking about the facts of life. Brandon, tell them what we're going to do with the facts of life.
Yeah, so if you remember a few months ago, we spoke about television sitcom revivals, restructures, and everything in between. But one of the shows that we believe does this the best in terms of restructuring the show is The Facts of Life. And so for a few weeks, we're going to be evaluating the series and diving into some of the episodes in particular that we believe best show the development of these changes.
Yes, you guys have to follow along and kind of take a look when we talk about the facts of life for the next couple months.
Yes, you definitely will. And Mom, where are we starting off with for The Facts of Life?
All right, we are talking about the show entitled The New Girl, Season 2, Episodes 1 and 2.
Yes, and so this is The New Girl Part 1 and 2, as you said, and this is November 19th and 26th of 1980.
All right. And I'm going to give just a little synopsis. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth than I normally do for the synopsis, just because I think it takes a little bit, we have to explain a little bit more for this. But anyway, so the girls are returning from summer vacation and they are seeing some changes. Mrs. Garrett is now actually the school dietitian, and they are introduced to a new student named Joe. Now, let me define who the they are. They, at this point, was going to be Blair, Natalie, and Tootie. And so Joe was introduced. And so Blair and Joe do not initially get along. And so they kind of have a little discussion. And they decide to go to a bar, I guess, to prove who's the, you know, who's the better person or who is the person who knows a little bit more. But anyway, they decide to go to a bar, and they end up becoming arrested since they, of course, are underage. Natalie and Tootie kind of tagged along. Initially, they were outside, but they did eventually go inside. And so they are arrested along with them, or I should say they're placed in kind of a juvenile detention type place. Anyway, so the girls are kind of so when Mrs. Garrett is actually able to go and she releases the children, she's able to get custody of the kids, and she speaks to their parents. And the girls are actually forced to room with Mrs. Garrett, and this kind of creates which kind of creates a group, just a general group for these four. And so they're required to actually work in the cafeteria also to pay for the damages that occurred. They did steal a truck too, if I failed to mention that. So anyway, this is kind of what generally happens at the beginning is that the girls are arrested and they are forced to live together.
Well, Mom, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, Brandon.
And overall, before we get into our analysis, I did want to ask, what did you think about this episode, or the double?
Well, I liked the episode. Not the best episode of The Facts of Life, but I did like it. I actually ended up watching this like twice in a row, just not because I didn't remember it, just because it just happened to be that it was on. But initially, we're also reintroduced to Arnold from Different Strokes. I do want to bring that up so that they're still showing the connection between Different Strokes and The Facts of Life being a spinoff from Different Strokes.
Yes, I definitely will actually speak a little bit about that in just a little bit. But overall, Mom, what did you believe to be pivotal about these two episodes, the beginning of the second season?
All right, I thought this was very important. First of all, from the last season, from the first season, I should say, of Facts Alive, the girls, there were 7 girls total. And so having that many girls, I think, made it a little harder to focus on each of them individually, even though they all had their own episode. The show was just beginning. And so it made it hard to kind of figure out where the show was going and how you were grouping the girls and things like that. We had a span of ages between the girls. And so I think for the audience, it probably was a little harder to kind of figure out where the show was going. I thought the show was written very well the first season, and it still continues to be written well. However, I just thought, for an audience perspective, um, it would have been harder to keep up with seven of them at a time, or even more if they added more kids to it. But anyway, so by focusing on four rather than seven, you're able to develop the characters, and time could be, well, like I said, time could be given to develop the girls. You learn a little bit about their personality, a little bit about their past and where they're from. The backstories of the girls could be more developed also. I will talk about Joe in just a little bit, but they did a great job of, within these first episodes, kind of giving her a backstory. Um, Also, the relationship with Mrs. Garrett could be more developed also, just because it is a smaller group and it's easier to kind of define them. And then also just give them a chance to kind of pair the girls too. With the original show, you kind of didn't know how they were pairing off. And so by having to, Joe and Blair being basically the same age, and then you have Natalie and Tootie being almost the same age, you were able to pair the girls. And then, you could see how the older were able to give advice to the younger, and then in some cases, vice versa. And so I just thought it was easier to me, it seems easier to focus a little bit more, to have a smaller group of girls. Just my thoughts. What about you, Brandon?
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I mean, going back to that very first episode of The Facts of Life, the episode Rough Housing that we spoke about a couple years ago, that for that one, you had to include the special guest stars, 14 people in the theme song, for cast members. And that's a lot of people to try to memorize, especially since it had a relatively short run for that first season. And so trying to sort of get to know them all and remember their names, let alone their personalities, is a bit much.
Yeah, it really it really was.
But yes, but with this one to include Mrs. Garrett and the addition of Joe, we're now down to five, which makes it a lot better. And as you're saying, you're able to pair everyone off. You have Mrs. Garrett as, of course, a sort of house mother, but in the sense of her role being the dietitian now. And then, of course, you have Blair and Joe, and then you have Natalie and Tootie. And so you're able to have those pairs. And something that we just spoke about actually earlier this week in our evaluation of The Facts Life Goes to Paris, which released a couple years later, is that we said that the show strives off of the connections that the characters have with each other. And I think that this change allowed for that pairing to happen.
Yeah, it did. It really did, Brandon.
But yes, and by being able to sort of simmer down the point, as opposed to Mrs. Garrett running a whole bunch of rambunctious girls, now it is four girls living under the care of Mrs. Garrett. And what were your thoughts about how they made it to how they wrote that in? Because not only did they give the exposition from 2D in the sense that, oh well, Mrs. Garrett's now the school dietitian, and that's conveniently where also the rooming assignments are, but then of course they intervene with the plan, and they get sentenced to Mrs. Garrett's care.
Yes, yes. Well, like I said, I just thought they did a good job of actually creating that scene and just kind of giving, like you said, the backstory to go along with it. And it was done pretty quickly and, to me, pretty seamless.
Absolutely. And the other girls from the first season, at least in portions, are still there throughout these episodes in the season. So Eastland still is the backdrop, it's just a different location in Eastland.
Yes, yes. And I do want to kind of jump ahead a little bit to let the audience do know that they did bring the girls back much later. And that was kind of fun to watch, to see how they did bring the original girls back and gave them their story so we can see how they turned out.
Absolutely. With the exception of the character of Molly, whose
Well,
last appearance is in The New Girl Part 2.
yes, yes.
But Mom, I'm going to go back a little bit to the connection with Different Strokes.
Okay.
So, as we mentioned, of course, that the series itself is a spinoff of Different Strokes, and what we thought was interesting, even when we evaluated the backdoor pilot, Garrett's Girls or the Girls' School, back when we evaluated even the series premiere, The Facts of Life. Um, is the fact that Mrs. Garrett got a spinoff when the show Different Strokes was only like a season in the sense of that it was still season one. It wasn't even like a much later sort of deal.
Yeah, and I thought that was amazing. They talked about Kimberly Drummond, going to private school, and that was not a secret. That was, told throughout the series. But I thought it was really interesting, and that they picked, Mrs. Garrett to be the one to actually kind of be the star of the new series, in essence. And so I'm glad that someone actually had the forethought to kind of look ahead. And they gave some of Mrs. Garrett's backstory along with it, that later on they did tackle, I mean, years later, that they tackled later on the Facts of Life.
Yes, and I know we'll be speaking about that for our evaluation of the series. But one of the reasons as to why I wanted to bring up Different Strokes is during the first season, the Facts of Life is that I think at some point they realized that the show in of itself wasn't quite clicking yet, but that they didn't want to give up hope, so they cut the release of season one in half. So the first half went out as per usual, and then the second half of the first season released towards the summer. But I think that they used that time to sort of evaluate, okay, what can we do with the show, uh, and how can we make this more interesting and understandable from the audience? And so I know the first season hit a lot of tough topics, and so I think by relating it more um, to the girls specifically, their storylines, and then narrowing down the cast, I think that they were pretty successful, and they used Different Strokes and had it where the show had a few different crossovers. Different Strokes characters came in the Facts of Life. Some of the girls came on to Different Strokes, and they were able to make it work out.
Yeah, they did. They really, really did.
Yes, and as you were mentioning earlier, Arnold from Different Strokes was in part one, but interestingly, not even mentioned in part two, so his storylines could have left unresolved there.
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know if that was cut out or something, but I do not recall Arnold coming back. They don't even mention him at all in the second part of it. If anything, it was really funny is that Mrs. Garrett went out to go save the girls, and Arnold's left by himself.
Absolutely. So it definitely is, yeah, interesting to sort of see that. But overall, I mean, I'm excited for us to continue diving into the Facts of Life. And Mom, we spoke about so many changes about, the characters and the setting. We didn't even speak about yet the change in the theme song.
I know. Well, I love the theme songs for the Facts of Life, and I love that they made for every few seasons there's a little twist to it, and I like that they change the pictures on a regular basis. That is something that I really like what they did, and I love the theme song to the Facts of Life.
But yes, but the second season, one of the biggest shifts is that they even changed the words of the theme song.
Yeah, they did. They did change the words to the theme song.
But yeah, but which one would you like better, the first season one or the rest of the series version?
I prefer the regular series version. In particular, I kind of like it when they kind of hit the one that's, I think it's fifth season or so. But yes, I do like the theme song to The Facts of Life.
Good to know. And I think my favorite one is the seventh season.
Okay, that sounds good. Can we talk a little bit about Joe?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Alrighty. And so I think the overall question is, what did Joe add to the show? Because we already had a group of girls. They very well could have picked, an existing person who was already there to kind of make the four. But instead, they chose to kind of go out and pick someone else new to the series. And I thought that was kind of great for them to do that because it kind of added a little bit of oomph to the show. And I say that because Joe was not like the other girls on the show, meaning that the character of Joe did not grow up in, I should say, with money as many of the other girls did. And so they were able to kind of give her a different spin. Joe's dad spent some time in jail. Her mother worked very hard to make ends meet. Her mom wanted her to have wanted her to have a better life, and so, that's why she was kind of sent to Eastland. We know that Joe was someone who was given a scholarship for the show. She was given a scholarship to attend the school. And so we know that she's someone who has had to work hard for everything that she's had. And they've had a point throughout the series to say that she was kind of the one who was the valedictorian. I think she's the valedictorian twice, if I remember correctly. And she also drove a motorcycle. She was a little bit of a daredevil, but yet she was sensitive, and but she had a roughness about her, which played differently with Blair. And so that kind of made them, I think, a good match because they were so opposite of each other. And so it was nice to watch that dynamic between them. And then, like I said, because Blair and Joe were the older ones, the advice they were able to give to the young Natalie, it kind of set well because you had two very different views giving advice to the younger group.
Absolutely. And one of the things I do want to quickly mention, since we mentioned Blair, is the fact that if you remember, and Mom, I know it's been a year or two, or actually a couple, but back to the original backdoor pilot for the series, Garrett's Girls, that and that one, Blair was the rebellious one.
Yeah, she was the rebellious one. She was. And so it was interesting that they kind of made a little switch there. Although Blair still had a little rebelliousness coming in, working with Joe, she still had a little rebelliousness there also.
Yeah, and I like, I mean, being able to see the dynamic of them, and I think as we explore the rest of the series and these major points, is sort of checking in to see where everyone is, because I think while everyone, of course, has their own character arcs throughout the series, I would say the ones of Blair and Joe I think are the most interesting to sort of to see from beginning to end and see where they progress from how they started.
It is, it is, and it's not, what I also like is that they include their parents in with it also, and so at some point in time we do see that Blair and Joe's parents do meet each other, and so it's kind of fun to watch that dynamic too.
Yes, it definitely is. I will say the show has always done a good job with being able to, I mean, to dive into who these people are as characters and see how it impacts them, and not just in a one off story, even if the situation itself isn't referenced, but how it still all adds on to each other.
Yes, very true, very true.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely am excited for us to continue, evaluating the facts of life. But Mom, actually, one thing I want to mention about Joe, saying that we had both had read Once Upon a Time, is the reason as to why they picked Nancy McKeon for Joe.
Oh, okay, go ahead, let us know, Brandon.
Yes, so again, we don't know the validity of everything because we read it such a long time ago. But one of the reasons as to why we had read um, that the actress was chosen for the character of Joe is because she could, based off commercials, what was it cry on demand,
Yep, I do remember reading that. Like you said, we can't verify the validity, but yes, I do remember reading that also.
and we do see that in part two.
We do see that.
But yes, I think that sort of adds the extra nature to this episode, and overall, I'm excited to see sort of how we progress throughout the series.
Actually, I am too, Brandon, and I'm looking forward to speaking about another episode of Facts of Life.
Yes, I certainly am as well, Mom.
All right, so everybody, these episodes will be sprinkled in within the month of January and February.
Yes, and feel free to watch with us and provide your own commentary in the comments as well.
Yes, let us know what are your thoughts about the changes that occurred during the Facts of Life after the first season.
Yes, definitely keep us posted,
All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching today.
and we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right, have a great day, everybody.